Howdy, everybody. Donna Schwartz here from the Everything Saxophone Podcast. I'm in St. Louis. Actually, I'm not. Mark Overton is in St. Louis. We're going to be featuring, this is a twofer. We've got the National Saxophone Museum and the awesome store Saxquest. All right, so this is going to be an awesome episode for you guys. So we're going to start with the National Saxophone Museum. Welcome, Mark, to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing, Donna? Thanks so much for having us here. This is awesome.
Oh, no, it's great. And if I can get my speech going, it would be a lot better. Okay, so had a
I
couple of
love that
thoughts
you're
to
in
start.
St. Louis right now. That's great, right?
That's awesome. In fact, here's the thing. So I've known about you for a while, but Bennett Wood on his episode, that was a couple of episodes ago, we were talking and he was talking about you guys and all that kind of thing and recommending that I speak to you. And
Yeah.
man, he's making me so jealous. I actually have never been to St. Louis. I wish I was closer. And I hope one day to get down there or across there, across the country to there. But
Yeah,
that's like,
Bennett's amazing, man. He's a great guy. He's now director of jazz studies at Webster University. I remember when he came in here as just a student, man, digging through horns and geeking out on stuff like everybody else. Now he's up in the big wigs, right?
yeah, I know. It's so awesome. He's such a great player, really nice guy, and new album out and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah, he's
it's so
killing it.
cool. Yeah, for sure. So you're actually in the National Saxophone Museum. Let's talk about this, for people that are maybe not even aware of this or don't know the history. So what's the history behind the National Saxophone Museum?
Yeah, it's been a labor of love for many years. Oh gosh, this goes clear back to my grad school days, where I was at WashU on a graduate stipend of 12,000 a year, and my wife was teaching in a small Catholic school at just about that same amount. So, when you're making ends meet and you're young and you're trying to figure things out, you find creative ways to make things happen. And one of those ways was buying and selling saxophones. And used to run ads in the local papers, the Trading Times, the Thrifty Nickel, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, just wanted old and used saxophones. We'll pay cash. And man, I took my little Geo Metro all over the place,
Wow.
finding instruments and horns. And, every once in a while you come across this little gem and you're like, holy mackerel, this is amazing. And the history starts to build on you. And you talk to these old guys who played the horns and played in the big bands in the 20s, and
Yeah.
history is contagious, man. And I just really started piling away all these little nuggets of information, and every once in a while I'd grab a really cool horn, and I just didn't have the heart to sell it. So
Mm.
it all started just from that, from a private collection of a few, now what I would consider maybe not so cool, but or still cool, but not the rarest of the rare. Just started out collecting an old busher here or there, or a gold-plated Conn or something that I just found super interesting, and then traded that up for something else, and then traded that up for something else, and then came across something else, and you meet people and you make connections, and then next thing you know, you've got a pile of saxophones under your bed, and they overflow into the closet, and then your wife looks at you, what are you doing with all these saxophones? So yeah.
Do you know, as an aside, do you know Doug Webb?
I do. Doug Webb's amazing. Great friend. Yeah, killer player. He was in town once when we were doing a little nine-piece band, a little mini big band, and he sat in with us. It was so much fun, man. Great player, great collector, super dude.
Yeah, for sure. And I had him on the podcast and my jaw fell to the floor when I saw his room filled with saxophone cases, all these saxophones. I couldn't believe it. And he still collects and he's a brilliant person and great player. And I just
100%.
I had to say something because you and Doug, if Doug lived near you, I think the museum would have to be like, two stores big or something like that.
We're like brothers of another mother, man.
For
I
sure.
love Doug. In fact, we were just talking the other day. Yeah, man, he's a wealth of knowledge too. He knows so much stuff. It happens when you talk to people and you buy these old horns and you remember stories, and when you're inquisitive and you've got a good memory, you start piling away a lot of information.
Yeah, and speaking of history, so what I could only imagine when you first started with this private collection and stuff, and you're starting to gather these older horns, and you're getting the stories from people, and St. Louis area is pretty rich when it comes to like jazz history, at least,
Yeah,
and I could only
yeah.
imagine some of the stuff that some of the stories. Let me ask you, is there one story in particular that you could remember that like kind of resonated with you?
Well, there's a bunch of them. Well, here's the thing about St. Louis. Man, we could spend the whole podcast talking about stories, but but St. Louis is fantastic place to be and to start this thing, because not only were there a lot of people and big bands that went through St. Louis, but uh, a lot of these old big band guys settled down in the Midwest and retired here. And St. Louis is 4 to 6 hours away from so many different places. We're 4 hours from Kansas City, 4 or 5 hours from Chicago, Des Moines, Iowa, Indianapolis, Nashville, Omaha. The circle of um, places where you can find interesting stuff. Memphis is a 4 hour drive. It's like and a lot of these cats retired in these places in the Midwest, and there's horns that would just keep popping up, and it blew my mind. And it was a lot of fun. The pre-internet days, I will have to say, were a lot more fun, because you just jump in your car and you go. And that was also for me before kids, where at a moment's notice I could just jump in the car and drive 6 hours and pick up an old Conn bass and a sopranino in my little Geo Metro, where the back window didn't work and it was a snow blizzard. And I don't mind risking my life for these things back then.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I'll tell you a story. I'm also we're 6 hours away from Elkhart, Indiana, where all of this started. Conn, Busher, Martin, and then all the offshoots, Gemeinhart, Linton, they all came out of Elkhart. Autolink, all the great manufacturers, Meyer Bros, they were in New York, but they were all distributed out of Elkhart. And just so much skill and so much hand craftsmanship went into these things. And all the guys who built these things, guys and ladies, there were men and women both on the factory floor in these instrument factories. And they're all out of Elkhart. It's amazing. So back in the 90s, when I was running these ads, wanted old and used saxophones, a lot of times I'd get a call out of Elkhart, Indiana, and I'd make that drive up there. And I remember one time talking to a guy who told me the story of the Kano saxes. And when we dig through the museum, we'll talk more about the Kano sax. But he was telling me that they would take these things in the backyard, because Conn had a baseball team, and all of the instrument manufacturers, Martin, Busher, they all had baseball teams, and they'd get together and play in the I guess not in the minor leagues, but whatever the manufacturers leagues were that they had back then. And it was serious business. They took their baseball
Wow.
coaches, they practiced, and they were expected to show up to practice. And it was kind of a real thing of pride to if Busher beat Conn or vice versa.
Oh,
But they would back in the 20s, they made all these Kano saxes that just didn't sell. It came out in the 1928, right as the Great Depression hit, and they marketed the hell out of it, but it just didn't sell. And I remember reading one old advertisement from Conn in one of the old journals, where they said I think it was seventh best-selling saxophone, or trying to hype it up. They couldn't lie. It wasn't their best-selling saxophone, but it was their seventh best-selling saxophone.
I don't know how effective that is.
Right. I don't know. They were back then. They were figuring out the marketing thing. I don't know if that was the best one. But this guy going, but I get on many tangents. But this guy, he was in his 90s, back in the late 90s when I was in Elkhart, and I was buying some repair supplies from him. He had some repair stuff, and he was telling me about that he would talk to what he called the old timers. So he wasn't actually an old timer, right? he was doing stuff for Conn back in the 40s and 50s, but he was telling me that back in the 30s and when these things wouldn't sell and they were just sitting on the shelf, um, they would take them in the backyard and play baseball with them because Conno sax is kind of this long, straight saxophone. They get it all beat up, and then Conn started what was called the what was it called? The Conn Vocational Repair School in 1941. I think they started that. So they would smash these things all up, and then they'd take them into their repair school and say, okay, now learn how to take out dents and learn how to straighten a rod or learn how to, do all these things. And then they literally, Conn, back in the 40s, started this vocation repair school that literally populated music stores and started the entire industry of instrument repair. And then all these people that came in and took this course then would go out in the country and learn and do repair. Because back before that, if your instrument broke, you either fixed it yourself or you sent it back to Conn and they repatted it.
Wow. This is so interesting. I didn't know this.
Yeah, and in fact, in our museum, we have hundreds and literally thousands of brochures and publications, things put out by all the different manufacturers. One of the things we have is the original repair manual for the Conn Vocational Repair School. And it's intense. It was a real, it was a real school. And there was an aptitude test that they would give you. And there were, serious math questions. They expected these people to know what they were doing. And it was pretty good.
Yeah, and well, the first thing I'm reacting to though is I can't even imagine, I'm sorry, like taking my soprano sax and like using it as a pool cue or just as a baseball bat. I mean,
Come on,
or
you've never done
pickleball.
that? Come on.
Oh my God, I have a heart attack. If one little dent, I'm like flipping out.
Right? Yeah, totally.
So this in a sense was you could say this is in a sense was the start of like repair schools and repair, starting the whole repair industry.
Yeah, it's where it all began. Not only did Conn start the whole concept of repair shops, but Conn also started the entire concept of music in the schools.
Wow.
In 1928, Carl Greenleaf, who became president, he bought C.G. Conn from C.G. Conn himself in 1916, I think it was. And he realized, wow, there's this huge market in the schools. And he started developing and putting together his salesmen would go out into the schools and literally talk to, and this is another story I got out of Elkhart, Indiana. They would set up meetings with principals of schools all over the country. And one of the things they would always do is they would make it a public meeting. So they say, bring the kids, make this big public meeting. And they would always ask beforehand, who's the principal's kid? And then they find out who it is, and they'd be like, okay, now we're in the middle of this presentation. I want to show you just how easy it is to play the musical instrument. And they would always pick the saxophone because everybody can at least get a sound out of the saxophone, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, I want to just pick some random kid out in the audience. And of course, they'd have you right over there, and they'd pick the principal's kid and come on up here. And then they'd give him a little soprano saxophone, and they'd be like, all right, this is how you play it, and this is how you move the keys. And the kid would blow it and make a sound, and then da da dee dee da da whatever, play a little scale, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're amazing! You're so gifted!" And it would be the principal's kid, and then he would feel all good about it, and it would start a why not have a band program? Every kid could feel like that, and they did. They went out and they had marketing schemes to market musical instruments in the schools, and it started out as a business opportunity for them to sell more instruments, but they really took it seriously and made it into a music education thing and created the whole school band program. It all came out of C.G. Conn back from the 1920s and 30s, and they started the Interlochen School of Music, and they started national music competitions and the whole concept of we go and we have these marching band contests and we have wind ensemble contests. All that goes back to Conn. That was all CG Conn's brainstorm back with the National Music Merchants Association and all of that. There's a lot of influence in the music instrument world.
That's again, I didn't know all this stuff. This is really incredible when you think about it. And that's probably also, again, Midwest, right? So
Yeah,
that's why like marching bands are so huge in the Midwest. And also I know out in the West too, not so much in the East where I'm from. Marching bands, we really didn't like marching bands on Long Island, but
yeah.
really
I have
hated
to
it.
admit, I usually often did not put a read on during marching band practice either. Sorry, Mr. Brizzy, but I didn't.
We had these uniforms. They look like skunk hats. Is these huge
Yeah.
big hats with like the white thing on the top. We felt like skunks. You're sitting there, you're trying to balance this hat while you're playing. It's just
And you
that
got the
was
plume on top, right? And it's blowing in the wind.
no, we didn't have the plume. It
Oh,
was
good.
our uniforms. This is the 80s. Our uniforms had to have been from the 60s. They were that old, like with the with the
We must have gone to the same school because exact same thing.
oh, and they just, yeah, no, that actually brings back a really bad memory. So let me go on from there.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah, let's not
no,
go
it's all
there.
good. It's all good. But no, but this is really very interesting because I
Oh,
didn't realize the effect on music education.
I'll point out something real quick while we're here. This is kind of interesting since we've been talking a lot about Conn. I don't know if I can flip this thing here. How about I try this?
Okay. There we
Okay,
go.
so here's what you're looking at. I'm going to get rid of these old metal sax oboes so you can see what's in this case. So again, I was running all kinds of ads in Elkhart, Indiana, and one time this person called and said, "Yeah, I've got this old Bible," and I said, "Well, I'm not really interested in Bibles, but that's interesting." And he said, "Well, it did belong to the mayor of Elkhart once, and I think his name was C.G. Conn." I'm like, "What?
Wow.
Really?" So this is actually C.G. Conn's family Bible.
Wow.
Um, and tucked inside of it was his original marriage certificate from 1869. So
Holy
this is
cow.
our little shrine to Conn. Not only did he run and became the mayor of Elkhart, but he also became a U.S. congressman. And sitting in here, this little book is C.G. Conn's rules and regulations of the whatever Congress he was in.
Wow.
That's his original book when he was in Washington. And then back here's a little uh, book of signatures, and that's C.G. Conn's signatures. These are all the senators, a book of with all the not senators, congressmen who were in Congress while Conn was there.
That's remarkable. And you know what? I mean, this again, I don't know too much of the history. I'm learning so much right here, but
There's
he
the
had
man.
to have been so brilliant. Yeah, there's his
Super,
picture.
super smart, super smart. And he was 100% for the worker. He started a worker share profit sharing program with his employees. Um, he was a tough guy to work for. He had a temper, and if you didn't do things right, you didn't want to be on his bad side. But at the same time, he knew how to make things happen, and he knew how to motivate people. There's another younger photo of him.
Yeah. Just from the story before with, when you were saying he singled out the principal's son, I'm thinking that's smart. That's
Right. Well, that was Carl Greenleaf who bought Conn from Conn.
oh, got
So
it, got it.
Conn got out of he started in 1875. He was actually a Civil War veteran as well.
Wow.
And the whole story behind how he founded the Conn Company was kind of an accident as well. Uh, Apparently, he got into a fist fight and broke his lip and started making trumpet mouthpieces with a little rubber rim around them.
Oh,
And that's kind of from an old sewing machine lathe, and that's how the whole Conn company got started. And then he met a guy named DuPont, and the two of them, who was a French instrument maker, and they started making trumpets together, cornets really. And then hired some people, and next thing you know, boy, within about a year, they were a full-fledged music instrument making company.
wow. This is so fascinating. This is really cool. All right, so we got the history of C.G. Conn. We're
Yeah,
looking at
and
some horns behind you too here.
yeah, and another genius was the guy who started the whole thing. And these are all original Adolph Saxes back here.
Oh wow.
Adolph Sax started, really invented the instrument in 1842 and patented it in 1846. And then these are all his instruments, and they're all, he was figuring it out. This little horn right here is an alto from 1852, but yet it's got a tenor style, a slightly curved neck on it.
Yeah.
There's another, that one's actually a tenor. That's a B flat tenor, and the neck on it is a little bit more,
More curved.
different shape, right? And then so that one's from 1870. Here's one from 1860s. Another tenor. There's a C melody over there that was made by Adolph Sax's son. And then some more sopranos. He made the whole line of them. Here's an Adolph Sax Barry over here just hanging out.
Yeah, and it's really interesting and going back to the cabinet over there, like the
Yeah.
differences in the necks, the
Yeah.
difference in the curvature, the size of the necks. I'm wondering how I've never played these old horns. I wonder how that affected intonation and and that kind of
Yeah, those are all the things Adolph Sax was experimenting with back in his day. He really was a genius. In fact, the story goes that he took one of these instruments. This is actually a serpent ophicleide. I don't know if you can see the.
Oh, bring that. Oh, okay. I thought that was just a decoration.
Yeah, no, this is a music instrument.
God.
It's got like a serpent's head on the top,
Yeah.
and it's a 9-keyed ophicleide, and it plays with a tuba or trombone style brass mouthpiece. But Adolph Sax was tasked with coming up with a woodwind that could carry in the French military parades. And the story goes that his voila moment was when he put the bass clarinet mouthpiece on an ophicleide and sort of came up with the concept of, and in his own mind, with the physics and the knowledge of instrument making that he knew, because his dad was also an instrument maker, figured out how they could create an octave key and make it in 12ths so that the saxophone has the same fingering in the lower octave as it does in the upper octave. But it all started from the ophicleide. This one that we've got here is from 1844.
That is just incredible.
Yeah.
Is incredible.
Well, you want to hear a few of these things played, or
Yeah, absolutely.
talking about history, or what do you think?
No, I would like to hear some of these played. That would be really cool.
All right, let's do it. I've got Ben Reese up here. Say hi to Ben.
What's
Hey,
up,
Ben.
Don?
Hey.
He's going to be my helper with playing some of these instruments. Thanks for,
What's up,
for coming
Chris?
up there. Ben's also, by the way, our flute repair tech and killer saxophone player in town. Not only saxophone, but clarinet, flute, piccolo. Pretty much plays it all.
Awesome. Very cool.
Let's start with some interesting instruments here. Since we were talking about Conn and their whole experimental world, up here is a bunch of one-off Conn experimental horns. These all came out of the Conn, what was called the experimental shop, or the model shop. And this one here is really interesting. Doug Lawrence was in here just the other day, and many years ago, he played this horn and he nicknamed it the Beast because it's the loudest, biggest sounding saxophone that he's ever played.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this horn dates to about 1932 or so. It has same side bell keys. The B and B flat are on the same side of the bell here. I don't know if you can see that. But it was made at a time where they were flip-flop, and there's a lot of experimental things on this horn. It was a precursor to what became the Conn 10M, and the Conn 10M became sort of the bread and butter of the guys in the big bands back in the 40s.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to hear the Beast.
Yeah. So this is the C.G. Conn Beast, straight out of the experimental department.
Yeah, can we get a close-up view of that?
Yeah.
So this thing is so powerful that it's like breaking Zoom. So How how is the intonation on that? Like, how does that feel,
It's pretty
compared to
good.
your, okay. And is it as easy to play as like a modern horn, or are you making a lot of adjustments?
Uh, if I mean, I play a butcher, so the left-hand table, which is usually kind of the first troublesome thing for people to navigate around. I mean, it feels really good. It feels like a 10M.
Got it. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, it
That's
should feel
cool.
like a 10M. This was sort of the precursor or the one of the experimental models that they were putting together when they were first designing the 10M. And honestly, I wish they would have stayed with this neck. Look at this weird bass clarinet style neck. Isn't that bizarre?
I know, I know. I'm thinking like, gosh, got to have a good swab to get through that.
And this you can't see this, but one of the other interesting things on this, and we're totally nerding out here, but if you can see these two little rods on the neck,
Yeah.
one of them is actually hollow. So that as spit accumulates here on the backside of the neck, it can actually flow down one of these tubes and then to the register there.
That's
So
incredible. That's incredible. Wow.
so that's the beast. Since we're playing horns and we're in the Conn world here real quick, we'll do two others real quick
Cool.
just for fun. So this one here is a gold-plated Conqueror, and the Conqueror came out. This one's from about 1942. This was the Cadillac of Conn saxophones. It has all the bells and whistles. It's got all kinds of perma-gesters and different features on it. And this was Conn's most expensive saxophone in the day.
Cool. And we caught most of that. We got most of that. But
Okay.
that I can even with Zoom, I can hear the difference in the sound.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you could definitely hear the difference in the sound. It's a nice sound. It's not that. It's not as booming as the beats.
100%. It's a more refined sound,
Yeah.
and the gold plating helps. It kind of warms it up a little bit. We're purposely playing them kind of soft so we don't clip out and break the internet here. But I'm glad you can tell the difference. This one here is a super early experimental model content, and this horn dates to about 1928. It's got this interesting bell to body brace. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh.
And then it's got this super interesting neck as well. It's got two
Oh.
octave keys on it. And
Oh,
this was actually Alan Loomis's design. This here is an Alan Loomis alto saxophone that has all kinds of extra keys on it. He designed that horn in 1919, and then came to work for Conn and became the head of their engineering department. And this is, we don't have a nickname for this one yet. Maybe we can come up with one today. But this is the another experimental Conn.
So that sound just right off the bat, it's not as refined, and
Correct.
yeah, and that's got a little bit more maybe more of a spread sound.
Yeah. It's got a little more of the beast character to it. It's kind of somewhere in between the beast and the conqueror, right?
Is the effect of having the two octave keys on the neck?
Well, the idea with that was to improve intonation. So the saxophone is an imperfect design, and everything's a compromise. And where they put the octave keys was to supposedly optimize intonation between the octaves. But in an ideal world, you'd literally have an individual octave vent for every note on the horn,
Oh.
and then you could generate perfect intonation. But us being musicians and not being perfect and being able to manipulate the sound, we don't really need that in practice, right? We can
Yeah.
adjust, and that's what we do. But that second octave key on the neck is sort of splitting the difference in half. So So instead of using one octave key for an entire octave, now you can basically use that octave key for half an octave. So you're closer. You're twice as close as to being in tune, supposedly, with this design. At least that was the theory behind it.
Does that mean that there's an extra thumb key?
No, it
Yeah,
actually
on the palm D, it kicks in at palm D.
So here-
from A up to C sharp, it uses this first octave key.
Oh, wow.
And then once you hit palm D, that's when it's got this little lever on the side here that is above the palm D pad.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when and it's an interesting point that you just brought up. When Adolph Sax first made the saxophone, it did have 2 octave keys, and you did have to manually. And I can show you that on a horn. When they first came out with when Conn first started making the saxophone, they had 2 octave keys too. This is an early Conn, one of the first, and you can see here on the back where you would press your octave key that you've got 2 buttons on the side here, right?
Yeah.
And anytime you got on a normal saxophone, you get to A, and the octave key automatically kicks in. But here you have to literally switch with your thumb.
Wow.
The very first design of these with a single octave key was by Conn, and this is really ingenious. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but here you can see that there's still 2 octave keys here. There's this octave key, and then there's this one, but they just cut the mechanism off, and they literally split this key into 2 right down the longitudinal axis, and there's a pivot that the key itself swings and acts as a single octave mechanism. It was not a great design in terms of stability, so it would go out of regulation all the time. But that was the first single octave key. That was what Conn called their new invention saxophone. That came out around 1912, something like that.
That is interesting because, yeah, that is interesting. And I'm even wondering too, for something like that, if, did that break easily? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It did. And that new invention horn was only around for about 3 years, between 1912 and 1915. And then Conn quickly developed a better single octave mechanism, probably at more Loomis. But
Okay, for sure.
What's interesting, all of those Adolph Saxes have that double octave mechanism too. And I was blown away. We had Chris Potter up here in the museum once, and there's actually a video of him online playing the Adolph Sax that we posted on YouTube. He kills it. Of course he kills it. He's Chris Potter. But he's just burning all over that thing. And I'm looking at his thumb, and he's just moving between those double octave. I'm like, what? You're like, how's this possible? And he said, well, my bass clarinet, I play an old, I think it was an old Selmer that has a double octave mechanism. So I guess his thumb was kind of used to just around on a double. He's also Chris Potter, so what do you expect?
That's true. Holy cow! Well, let me ask this question. As we're trying out these horns, and Ben's playing through them. You have to. I'm going to make an assumption, but you have to keep in mind the mouthpieces that were around at the time.
Sure.
Okay.
Can you talk about that? What were you playing there, Ben?
That's Lost Wax.
Oh yeah. So the Lost Wax, we were talking about vintage pieces. So back in the day, a lot of the guys in the big bands were playing Autolinks. Autolink started his whole thing back in the late 20s. Interesting story there too. Another quick side note, if you want. Autolink was a German immigrant, and him and his brother Ernest Link came over, and they were in New York, and they were orphans. And this all came from a paper that I got from a guy out of Elkhart that was in the original pen of George Bundy. And George Bundy was the founder of the Selmer Company, along with Alexander Selmer. The two of them in New York started the Selmer Company. And he was talking about when they were in New York, and he hired these 2 rugrats off the street to do some stuff around the shop, and their names were Ernest and Otto Link.
Wow.
And Otto Link in particular took a great interest in the mouthpieces, and Alexander Selmer was there, and he was an expert at refacing mouthpieces, and he was constantly fixing mouthpieces all the time. His brother would send him this big box full of mouthpieces, and he would always complain they sucked, and he would start fixing them. And Autolink really wanted to know what he was doing, and it was a secret he wouldn't tell. So, and this is in George Bundy's writing. I'm not making this stuff up. He said that Autolink climbed into the cabinets above Autolink or above Alexander Selmer's desk, and when he started working, he would peek out the cabinet because apparently he was a little guy, and would watch Alexander Selmer reface these mouthpieces, and that's how he learned how to do mouthpieces. And then by the 30s, he started his own company, and it's all history from there. But
oh my gosh, no, for sure. This is so interesting. These stories are so cool. Holy cow.
that's the founding of how Autolink started, hanging
Yeah.
out in a cupboard watching Alexander Selmer face mouthpieces.
That's so awesome. And and this is coming from, I'm just thinking as Ben is trying these horns out, like putting a modern mouthpiece on these horns doesn't make sense because it's not authentic. It's just not,
Yeah, sometimes the chamber can be different. He was playing that lost wax mouthpiece, and getting back to that, that's a mouthpiece that was manufactured by this guy in New York whose name was Bob Ackerman. And he and Ted Klum, I think, collaborated together to basically try to replicate the old Autolink mouthpieces. And they used a lost wax mold technique where you literally destroy the mold after every mouthpiece. So you're making a mold off the original, and then using the lost wax techniques, which is a whole process in and of itself. And they're great. I played one for years. I still have it in my case. They're really, really good mouthpieces. They're made out of a resin material, but they're basically copies of the old, and everybody's trying to copy the old mouthpieces. And in my opinion, these old lost wax pieces have something really special, but they didn't make that many of them, so they're kind of hard to find.
And when you say, okay, so let me ask this question. When you say that, they're kind of special and all that kind of thing, what are the qualities of the mouthpiece? Like, is this the type of mouthpiece that someone would play on a combo in a big band?
Yeah, it's definitely a jazz mouthpiece. But what I get out of them that's really great is they're just so responsive. It's an incredibly responsive mouthpiece, and that's the thing that, in my opinion, people have a hard time replicating. Is just with the old New York Meyer altos and the old Autolink slant sig tenor pieces, they just have this response and resonance that is almost magical, and you get a good one, and it's just really hard to replicate that for some reason. People have tried for years, and even Autolink isn't really doing it today.
Right. No, that's right. And I'm just, kind of thinking out loud too, with these responsive mouthpieces and stuff like that, at how I guess it's changed over the years. I mean, I've spoken with Jody Espina,
Yeah.
and also, Thea Wana and all that kind of thing, and great mouthpiece makers. I'm curious, is there a section in the museum that addresses mouthpieces, or is it mostly the horns?
It's mostly the horns. We do have this one little fun display here. Let's see if I have it. I'll flip my screen real quick. So this is one of our cases with all kinds of stuff. This is some mouthpiece molds here. And this is how the Autolink mouthpieces started out. They were half shells that were soldered together.
Oh, wow.
And then this is an original blank when it first came out. And then this is a slightly more finished one. You can see that tip. Imagine that.
Oh, God, yeah.
This is what they started with, though.
Wow.
And then it went from that to this. They got the bite plate in there. Got the tip fixed a little bit, but still not finished. And then from that to the final finished product.
It's incredible that you have these. That's just incredible. You know what I'm curious about? Okay, so the resin material for the lost wax mouthpieces, right? I'm just wondering what was the thought process with Autolink in terms of creating metal mouthpieces?
Oh man, that's a good question. Although he wasn't the one who started making metal mouthpieces, there's actually a really good book out by Dave Tuttle, who goes through mouthpiece manufacturers out of Chicago. And he actually focuses mostly on clarinet mouthpieces, but a guy named Goldbeck was making metal mouthpieces back in the 20s. And I think that's probably where Autolink got his idea from. And there's a whole history of mouthpieces as well that's a rich history full of all kinds of fascinating facts. But Dave Tuttle's put together a really great mouthpiece history making book. I think it's out there. You can buy it on the internet.
That's cool. No, this is so fascinating. What else can you show us from the museum that?
Yeah, Ben, we want to move on to altos a little bit here?
Sure.
Just for fun, this is just one room of the museum, by the way. There's a whole other room and lots of other sections, and we haven't even got to the repair shop or the basement or any of that yet.
We will definitely get there in a couple of minutes for sure.
Yeah, there's so much. So this is another interesting saxophone. This is an alto, but you can see this weird neck on it. It's not the same design as a normal. Like I'll pull up this is a regular Conn. This is a gold-plated Art Deco Conn. And its neck is, here, I'll flip this around. Okay. This is the normal alto neck. And you can see this thing kind of has a different angle, right?
Oh, totally.
And then it also has this little screw-on mechanism. So this is what we call the small bore alto. It has a much smaller bore. I don't know if you can even see how much narrower it is from a normal alto, right?
Yeah.
So it's got a much smaller bore, which gives it a real interesting sound. Almost kind of a West Coast dry sound. Hopefully we don't clip that.
Okay, we're not capturing all of that. Maybe there's a way to, we're not capturing all of that, unfortunately.
Oh, shucks. Let me keep playing against that wall.
That's better.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, we caught that. Now okay, so that's interesting. That's got a nice sound to it. Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Wow.
Sorry, Ben, we're capturing your backside when you play now.
and
yeah.
Does there have to be special mouthpiece considerations for this one?
Well, I mean, not really. As a what are you playing on there, Ben?
This is a Van Doren V16, and it looks like we put a thicker cork on here, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
accommodate.
I see. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a thicker cork on it. But yeah, this is just a modern Van Doren mouthpiece. It seems to function pretty well with it.
Yeah,
and a long cork too. It's a very long cork.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that have? Let me ask you a question. Does the length of the cork have anything? Does that have any effect on on sound? And stuff like that.
That's such a deeper question than what you might realize, because the answer is everything, especially as you get up to the top of the horn, has an impact on the sound. So, yeah, the length of the cork. Even some guys are critical about the type of material that you use to attach the cork to the neck.
Okay.
And even if you scratch the lacquer a little bit up around where the neck is, or strip a little lacquer off right at the junction here where the neck meets the cork, that can sometimes free up the sound just a little bit. They're all very subtle little things, but to a player and to the response and how the horn feels when you play it, all those things accumulate and make a difference.
Thank you for answering that. That always intrigued me, for sure. That's a nice sounding horn, though.
Oh, it's gorgeous. And again, it's a one-off. I wish they would have continued to make some of these things.
Yeah, but you know what though? With the angle of that neck, that the only thing would be like you would have to adjust the way you approach it, because you could.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Did you feel that, Ben, when you were playing it, that you're kind of holding it at a slightly different angle, or?
Well, it starts to feel like the Conn sax.
Yeah. Ben mentioned it starts to feel like the Conn sax, and that's a good point, because here I'll show you. We'll hold up a Conn sax.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that you could easily revert to a clarinet embouchure, and you don't.
Right.
Yeah,
good point. So this is a Conn sax here. This is one of those horns that they would take and play baseball with in the backyard of the. I mean, you can see it has that same sort of up neck angle, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I almost wonder. Now you're making me think. I almost wonder if because this horn was made in the Conosax was 1928. It was designed probably in 26. This little small bore was from like 25, 26, almost the same time frame. I'll bet this horn was sort of used as a concept for the Conosax, or they realized the Conosax sound was interesting and they decided to try that neck design on a small bore alto to get that kind of Conosax, that pretty Conosax sax sound out of an alto. I don't know. Those are the things that we can only speculate about now.
Yeah. No, this is so fascinating. And I have to say one thing, please, people, don't use your saxophone as a baseball bat.
Yeah, please don't.
Unless you want
Right.
really expensive repairs.
we do appreciate the business when people bring repairs in, but we don't encourage them to force the repairs like that.
Oh, God. That's awesome. For sure. This is so great. And oh my gosh, this is awesome. We could spend like hours here, but you know what? For the sake of my gosh, for the sake of time,
Yeah.
why don't we move to?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll do just a quick little walkthrough as I'm walking out of the museum, and then you want to move down to the repair shop.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, for all the people that are listening to this podcast, you have to watch the video for this, because if you're a saxophone player, this is like being in a candy store. And
here's the other room real quick.
Yeah, look at this. You're probably drooling as you're looking at this, as I am right now.
Here's our Kings, nice silver sonic King, Zephyr Special, gold-plated silver sonic. There's all kinds of fun horns down here.
Yeah, of course. Wow, what is that?
That's a straight tenor. It's actually a Kyleworth.
Wow. Yeah, that straight tenor is probably bigger than me.
It's super fun to play.
I would need a stool to just stand up. No, I'm just kidding.
This is a super early Conn. We just found that instrument. It's the earliest known Conn. We found that in a high school attached to a sculpture. Other little fun things in the museum. We have all these photos hanging up of the factory in Elkhart, Indiana, of CG Conn. These are all different photos of different departments, and you can see all the guys working on the horns in the background.
Wow. That is really just so cool. And you know what, as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, I grew up playing trumpet, and I know about Elkhart, Indiana, and, all that kind of thing. It's a shame that this stuff's not there anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like the old factories are not there anymore. Wow. Okay, and we're heading downstairs into the repair shop, which, let me ask you this question as we're getting down there. So for the repair people that work for you, do they also have to, I think, get versed in the old horns too, right? They have to understand that stuff. Yeah.
And it's different. There's some aspects of repair, and I'll let the repair guys talk about that too, but there's things with the old horns that are just a little bit different than when you're dealing with new horns, in terms of the fragility of the lacquer, the mechanisms, the rust.
Right. Well, and plus the parts too, right? Because how do you find the parts?
Yeah, 100%. I'll introduce you to Josh Creekmore. He's our shop manager, and he said rust right now because he's dealing with a sarrusophone. This is a Conn sarrusophone. The part he's holding is actually two keys, but they are, I believe, frozen together.
Yeah. So the way this is constructed is that the rods in a lot of these are like on oboes, where it's a rod with a pivot hole drilled in the end.
Okay.
And clutch screws that hold various components together, so that you can have multiple keys moving in different ways on one rod that's mounted on pivot screws. It's a little weird and it's kind of cool, but when they get rusted, oh boy, it is a chore to get them undone.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. And so Josh, let me ask you, like, how much extra training did you need to understand and be able to work on the vintage horns?
I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
A lot of it's learn on the fly.
A lot of it is, yeah, all of it's been learn on the fly, research on my own time. I didn't attend a trade school to get into this. I apprenticed at a small shop and then moved here to St. Louis and apprenticed here with George. And really, the big thing about working on vintage horns is just learning their quirks and their eccentricities, but also being mindful about the differences in the ways that they are constructed, both in manufacturing techniques, but especially in key geometry. Because when you're dealing with something like a vintage Conn or Fisher, the way the keys are constructed, the angle of approach toward the tone hole and everything is just different from your modern stuff that's pretty much all based on Selmer, Mark VI and newer. It's almost everything modern is derived from those. And so that leads to differences in voicing, differences in the way things feel, again, because of that key geometry, and then differences based on the bore design and tonal placement. And so that's why, like, sax repair is not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's why you can't set up a vintage Martin with the same key heights you can a modern Selmer and expect it to play well or play in tune.
Or even the same pads sometimes, for that matter. Same resonators, it all makes a difference.
Some different stuff, yeah.
How do you, I'm curious though, how do you find the parts?
Well, I mean, with regards to things like pads and resonators and springs, those are fairly universal, I would say. There's not a one-size-fits-all pad thickness, but the reputable manufacturers manufacture pads in different thicknesses, so you can get, your really, really thin pads that are proper for your Bounier and LeBlanc and Vito horns, or you get your regular thickness pads that are pretty much useful for anything Selmer derived or your vintage American stuff. Springs, again, fairly universal. They're just tapered needles. But as far as your other things, like, oh, hey, there's a broken key or a missing key or a key guard, boneyards.
And when he says boneyards, I'll show you some of this down in the basement at some point. But we literally have drawers full of old keys, and we steal parts from these things all the time. Here's bells, clarinet bells, keys, all kinds of stuff. And Josh has gotten really good with this device over here, which is the lathe.
Okay, got it.
And you can see that super complicated, and it can tear your arm off if you don't know what you're doing. So everybody's very careful with it.
Yeah. Wow.
But this is very useful for making all kinds of things, from keys to tenons to even tools, things that we could use around the shop.
Wow. That's stuff I've always wondered about. And, I find that interesting too. And, actually, while we're on the subject of repairs and that kind of thing, so I have to ask, what the story, like what is the worst thing, the worst repair, or the worst situation you've seen, coming in to the store that you had to try to repair?
Well, go ahead.
Usually the worst stuff are things that are water damaged, whether that's been from flood damage, sitting in musty basements for 40 years, fire. We have right now waiting in the repair queue a set of horns that were in a house fire. And so the instruments got really, really hot to the point of messing up the lacquer and detempering the springs. And then they got water damage when the house was, when the fire was handled by firefighters. Or in the case of this instrument, this is what we call a barn find, where instruments, and usually it's stuff from the early 20th century, just get left in barns and warehouses and storage sheds, and over time they get wet, their cases rot away, and everything gets all rusted in place. And those are usually the worst. I mean, you get your schoolberry saxes that are turned into bananas, and that's a particular kind of job. But that's the normal kind of rough. It's not the mentally taxing, nerve-wracking tough of trying to carefully disassemble a 120-year-old instrument.
And ultimately frustrating at times.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to really love what you're doing, you know, not only to deal with the vintage horns and to try to, get them back, to a playable shape or whatever. But I'm going to say this too, again, I taught public schools. I know what kids do to horns, and you really have to love repairing because, some of the things I don't even understand what these kids do with the horns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it seems like every month we look at a horn and go, "How did you manage that?"
How?
Yeah. So they're not playing baseball with these horns like they did back in the day. They're doing something else.
They're falling down the stairs. They're setting them out on the marching band field and then tripping over them.
Or you have band directors telling their kids, "Okay, as part of our routine, we're going to go on the ground with your instrument."
What?
That's a true story
Oh my God.
of a local band, and messed up this girl's 2-year-old berry sax that she owned, and that was.
Yeah.
I wanted to have words with the director.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if I were her parents, I would definitely have words because, the investment, it's you don't want the money that's spent on that. And there's no reason to tap it on the ground, not even on a cushioned thing. It's on the ground. It's on the hard ground.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, that's what I get to tell the horror stories of the abused berry saxes that you can just stand up on their bow and walk away.
Yeah, the bottom bow's so flat.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know what? While we're talking about this, I'm just curious too, a number of things in terms of placing the horn down on a chair. People do it both ways, meaning they'll put it like on the rods, they'll put it on the other side. What do you recommend?
Depends on the instrument.
Okay.
That's very vague. The biggest thing is you just want to do it in a way that accomplishes two things. One, don't bend your keys. And two, make sure that it's on there in a balanced way that it's going to be less easy to knock off. But there's never zero risk.
Right. That's true. That's true. So
if you're talking about like a modern horn, like your Yamahas and Selmers, where their pinky keys for the left hand kind of stick out to the side,
yeah,
don't set them down on that. Flip it over.
Right.
If you're talking about your vintage stuff that's got left hand bell keys, those usually have big old guards to protect those keys. You can lay it down on that side. So it's like the reverse.
Got it. And when it comes to putting it in the case, and I don't know if this is an issue or not, but is it okay to have the horn standing upright, vertical, the case?
Oh, when it sits in the case.
Yeah, it's sitting in the case, right? So the horn's upright, vertical, or flat on the floor, horizontal, or does that not even matter?
It depends on the case. If the case, first of all, is the case secured? Are all the latches done? Zipper zipped?
Sure.
Second, it depends on if the case is designed for that. So, like, Mark, you want to point down at that case right there? This case
would be a
this
bad
old
one.
Conn case. It was an awful design because you can't stack these, you can't stand them up on their end, and people do it anyway, and it damages things. However, if you'll point over to that case to your right there, Mark, that case is designed to be stood up on its end. You can pull it out and flip it up. It's got feet on one end and a handle on the other.
So yeah, some cases will have feet on the backside and feet on the side here too.
Got it.
And
But in terms of just long-term stability, the horn's stable either way, so long as it doesn't get knocked over. We've got horns waiting in the repair queue that are all stacked up here.
Got it, because they can be.
They're all cases that are meant to be stored that way. And then back here, we've got horns just sitting on the shelf waiting, and then those are sitting the other way. So it's not going to hurt the instrument to sit upright or sit down. The biggest thing is just, is it secure? Is it going to get knocked over?
either way, your E-flat pad is getting toasted.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What did he say?
Either way, your E flat pad is going to be the one sucking in all the moisture.
Oh, yeah. And that's why we have key leaves. That's why I
Right.
use key leaves and
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yes.
And then constantly.
For
We
sure.
love key leaves.
Yeah, Key Leaves is an awesome product, and I've interviewed Roland Brown a number of times, and definitely reviewed his products. I think repair people like the fact that Roland, created that, and also the vent vine as well to,
Yes.
because
Yeah. In fact, my wife's at the Midwest convention in Chicago right now, and she ran into him in the hall and said, "Hey, how's it going?" So
oh, cool, that's good, that's good. No, for sure. Any other kinds of like tips you can share for, we've got listeners from all different levels and that kind of thing, where um well, actually, yeah, here's one. I know for me personally, when I'm done playing, I don't leave the mouthpiece on the neck. I don't leave the mouthpiece on the cork or anything like that. I'm always using cork grease and that kind of thing. But there are some people that definitely leave everything attached. They even leave their mouthpiece, their reed, attached. I mean, there's
oh my God.
stories.
We've seen it. We've seen it all. You can barely get the reed off. It's so attached. And when you finally do, you've got an entire ecosystem growing in there.
Yes.
It's my opinion that players that are playing every day should absolutely disassemble their reed and ligature, take their mouthpiece off of the neck cord, because what happens is that in your saliva is a lot of calcium. And when the water evaporates away, it leaves that calcium behind, which then forms these little cryptic structures that make things stick together and they look gross. And then when you're dealing with neck cork, almost all neck corks are natural cork. They have a bit of springy sponginess. But if you always leave your mouthpiece on, it compresses that out and it stays there, and it gets compacted over time to where you start to have a leak there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't adjust in and out as easily.
That's the biggest problem when you get hard neck corks.
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck. Your mouthpiece can only go in one position, and you need that give to be able to adjust to pitch.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure.
I will say this as well: in as much as any player is able, let your instrument air dry. The worst thing about playing and being in gigs, being in band class, going on the run is play, swab it out, shove it in the case. Dark area, moisture in there. That's how you get mold. That's how your pads rot out. I've been having this discussion with some college kids lately. They're like, "I'm always so busy." I'm like, "I know, I get that. But when you go back to your dorm room at night, take your horn out and put it on the stand. Let it air dry overnight while you're not using it. And that will prolong the usefulness of your instrument."
100%. And we're not saying don't swab the horn.
Yeah,
we're saying swab it for
please
sure.
swab
But then leave it out of the case if you can. Right.
How do you feel, Silverstein they've had this for a couple of years. They have this like air dryer type of device that can dry out the horn. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm not aware. Zach is our product guy. He probably knows more about that than I do.
Is it like a little fan you stick in the bell and it blows?
Something to that effect. I haven't tried it myself, but I've seen the ads for it, and I haven't had a chance to see it at the NAMM show. But yeah, they have something where it helps to dry out the horn. There may be another company that does that as well. I don't, and again, I guess when you guys check that out and you see that, then you may have some opinions about that. And
to me, it's the concept is great because, like Josh was saying, anything you can do to make sure the horn gets dried out and doesn't get stored away wet, so that your E flat and your G sharp pads just toastify on you.
Oh, so your springs don't rust.
And your springs don't rust. That's always a good thing.
Yeah. And you know what? Let me ask you another question too. So I use ant-free swabs. Peak Music Stands and ant-free, they're kind of the same thing. The ant-free swabs look like a rug mop. And they're really good swabs. But aside from that, like, do you have recommendations for like the best swabs that, you've seen that would be good for, people to use?
Well, I'm definitely a big fan of the pull-through swabs. The shove-it things, the first thing we do when we get a horn that has a shove-it in it is to throw that thing away because it just leaves the moisture in the horn.
We always recommend customers to not leave their shove-its in the instrument.
Yeah.
A quality shove-it can be a good a good swab. And by that, I mean like the actual Pad Saver brand, and really
Yes.
only the Pad Saver brand, because everything else is
Yes.
a shedding mess of garbage.
Yeah.
But using that as a swab it out and leave it in the case, but not in the saxophone is okay. But generally, we discourage those pull-through swabs. My personal favorite pull-through swab is the Cannonball Dragon swab. But you have to go to a Cannonball dealer.
Is that a silk swab?
No, I'm pretty sure it's microfiber.
Oh, microfiber.
But it's these several layers of alternating jagged cuts of microfiber, and it has a rope or a string at either end. So you drop it in like you would a regular swab, pull it up, pull it down, pull it back up, and it whoop, 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 moves the moisture. They're really cool, but you have to be a Cannonball dealer to get them, so we don't carry them.
I'm a big fan of the microfiber swabs for saxophones, not so much for the smaller woodwinds like oboe and even clarinet. I like silk swabs there because even though they're not as absorptive, they don't swell like a microfiber swab does. So they will, and they're just not as sticky, so they don't get stuck. The worst thing, not the worst thing, but one of the worst things that can happen to you as an oboe or a clarinet player is to get your swab stuck in the instrument.
Yeah.
Because then you risk damaging the bore to get it out. So I love silk swabs for the smaller woodwinds, but I love microfiber swabs for saxophones and brass instruments.
That's a great tip.
For Barry Sax, I don't remember, Hodges, I think, makes one. They make a swab for the crook of Barry Saxes that is a foam on a flexible wire that's covered in silk. And that is great for Barry Sax. Shove it in to dry it out, because right up there, fairly cute at the top of a Barry Sax is, where all your spit collects. You got to drain it out, but it's also where you're going to have the most corrosion buildup in a Barry Sax if you don't get it thoroughly dry. And over time, that can A, metal, B, cause calcium buildups in there that can over time mess with the intonation.
I think Hollywood Winds makes one of those as well, if I'm not mistaken.
They may, I'm not sure. I know Hodges makes one, that's why I mentioned them, because they also make the silk swabs that we recommend for the smaller ones.
Right. Yeah. Hodges is a good company. I definitely have a lot of their silk swabs. I even actually have a silk swab from them for my trumpet lead pipe.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's it's a great idea. No one thinks about that. Like the snakes that you put through brass instruments, they don't clean. They don't. That's like if you have a peanut butter sandwich in there. Like you want something that's gonna, you want to use the cleaning rod and to go through as much as you can, but using like a silk swab or some kind of absorbent swab to get through the crooks and the main lead pipe is, to me, it's the best thing.
100%.
Cool, awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Give you the quick walkthrough here of the shop while we're here. Here's another bench. Say hello to Nate Bishop. Nate studied with Chip McNeil at Champaign, another great saxophone player here and fantastic repair tech. Talking to Josh right now is Aaron Standing.
Aaron.
Often at this bench we have George, and Josh mentioned George. We're very fortunate to have him. George is I think he might be getting close to 70 now and getting close to retiring, but we're so fortunate to have him, a wealth of knowledge of vintage horns, and he's the one who helped us really set up this whole shop when I first started here. All your dent tools back here, your dent machine. This is the sculpture that we pulled that Conn saxophone from.
Oh, wow.
And we replaced it with an old high-pitched busher.
That's so cool.
The chemical room, you got your bathtub washed. You got all your different chemical supplies here. Here's the old buffer this came from Huntworth Music, which was the big music store in St. Louis in the 1940s. So, this machinery never dies. It goes on forever. And you got all your red rouge on the walls. So we keep this door shut as often as we can.
Wow. It's so fascinating that just, from the vintage horns to like vintage equipment, right? Vintage repair equipment and stuff. Wow.
Right. Yeah. I'll give you the quick walkthrough through the basement before we hang up. This is where all these horns are waiting for repairs currently.
Oh, it looks like Doug Webb's closet. No, I'm sorry. We talked about that before.
It gets worse. There's a pile more of
Oh,
horns.
gosh.
This beast back here
Oh,
is a contrabass saxophone. This is the body tube for it. At some point, we'll get that restored.
wow.
Then we go over to the other side. More instruments. Then these are all horns that aren't customer horns. These are all our horns that we're waiting to get restored. At some point, they'll show up on the
gosh.
website.
Wow, that's a ton. How you? Oh my gosh, that's going to take forever.
Yeah, it's forever is right.
Wow, wow.
And then we get back into here. And this is the dungeon. These are all horns that we've pulled. What Josh was calling barn finds, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
there's a nice gold-plated Conn up there, but yeah, this is just the dungeon of instruments, and some of these have had severe water damage. You can see there's just corrosion all over this. This is an old reed contrabass.
Oh my gosh.
This thing down here is an old Busher 400.
I mean, can that even be restored?
Well, we're going to find out. I think the answer is no, but it's still valuable because it has parts. And, you need a certain key on an old 1940s Busher 400 tenor, and there you go. So a lot of these end up just being parts horns.
Do you get a lot of, so you're in St. Louis area, right? Do you get a lot of, I'll say for you and your surrounding areas, 4 or 5 hours out? Because I'm thinking I'm in California, people have, there's fires out here, right? But we don't necessarily have floods. But you guys may get more floods than we certainly would. And so
we do. We get floods. We've got an instrument. It's a Series 3 Barry that we're working on right now that was in a tornado. And it was found about 3 blocks away from its home, and it's all smashed up. That one will be a fun one to fix too. Here is introduce you to Zach real quick.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Zach.
Zach is working on our Saxquest mouthpieces right now. We've got the core, and we've got the bridge, and we've got the lead, and we've got the Haas, and Zach's doing a great job of getting that final finishing touch on the facings, and looks like he's painting in the logo as we speak.
These just came from James Bunty finishes these. So really all I'm doing is just I'm going to clean them and paint them. The core, so James does all the hand finishing of those, and they come out really pretty much perfect every time. So these are the but
so for these mouthpieces, what the Saxquest mouthpieces, what styles of music would they be best for? Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's sort of it depends on the mouthpiece itself, right? We have a piece that we called the Lyric that we've worked on for a while that resembles more of a classical mouthpiece.
Got it.
We've got the core and the bridge and the lead. The lead is an alto piece. The core and the bridge are both tenor pieces. They're going to be sort of your straight ahead jazz sound. And then we've got your mouthpiece over here called the Haas that is based on a vintage Berg Larson. And it's also going to be a sort of a straight ahead jazz sound, but it's going to have a little more bite to it. Zach, you have anything more to say about these?
Yeah, I mean, most of the pieces are for straight ahead jazz, but the pieces that are like made off the Berg Larsons are going to have a lot more brilliance to them.
We're finding the Haas, what we call the Haas. It's the one made off of a 40s vintage slant Berg Larson. People are really digging them, and I think we're going to kind of pursue that one a little bit harder because it's an interesting sound that other mouthpiece people are not going after right now. So we're finding it a really unique, interesting mouthpiece to show people and have them play.
That's cool. And let me ask you, so people that are not in the St. Louis area, like, is there something, I didn't notice this, is there something on your website that features these mouthpieces?
They're there, but they're just listed as another modern mouthpiece. We're not always the best at marketing over here.
Okay.
We kind of do what we do, and
Yeah, we're kind of down to the last of most of them, except for the core line. And we're kind of going to be revamping which ones we're going to get more of. It's always been sort of we did it because we thought that would be really cool, but with such a small office, we never really got a lot of them made, and we never really advertised them. So they are listed under our website under just Saxquest as the manufacturer, but there might be some that are unlisted because we're just out of them at the moment, or there might be some facings that aren't available at the moment. But fortunately, it's easy if anyone just sends me an email, or I can usually give them a pretty straight answer of when they might be able to expect one again.
Yep.
So
Got it. Cool. Awesome. We'll put that in the show description in the notes for sure.
yeah. Before he walks away too far, I'm going to introduce you to John Huff too. John is our shop manager and basically the wheels that make this whole operation run. So
love you, Wilson.
Awesome. And so now, so we're in the back, and now where are so in terms of the Saxquest shop, so this is where
this is just this is like the front door. This is what you see here. I'll take you outside and walk you in as if you were a customer. How's that?
Okay, cool. That's good. So and I get to see at least it's not raining out. That's good. It's not too
Yeah,
cold.
it's not raining. So this is actually Cherokee Antique Row. There's lots of antique shops up and down this street.
Oh,
And
cool.
we're very fortunate to have the Mud House right down here. It's a great coffee place.
Okay.
This is the shop. This is Saxquest.
Nice.
So you walk in, and the first thing you're going to see is a huge display case full of what sometimes people walk in on the street and say, "Oh man, you guys have cigarettes." Like, no. These are all reeds.
That's cool. And can you go back to the reads for a second? Because
Yeah.
one thing that's so upsetting, a lot of, stores have been closing, all that kind of thing. Everybody's buying things online, but it looks like you've got a good amount of variety of reads.
Oh my gosh, we have so many reads, and this is only a small sampling of the ones. We've got more in back. We do try to. That's the one thing when it comes to read. We're not always able to have everything in stock, but we definitely try with reeds and mouthpieces and things like that.
That's great.
It's hard to have everything in stock all the time, but we definitely do our best. You mentioned earlier, here's our pile of Theowani mouthpieces. So
Got it.
whenever you're ready to jump into one of those, we got you covered.
That's awesome, because again, most stores are not carrying these mouthpieces because they're not getting the traffic, coming in, to justify holding them.
It's a big investment. It's a big investment, and it's a commitment, really. I mean, it's definitely more money in inventory than is probably justified. If a normal business person were to look at this business model, they would cringe and say, "Why are you holding all those instruments in that museum? Why are you holding $20,000 worth of mouthpiece inventory when you might sell it for, $350 or $500 or whatever it is?" But we do it because that's the way this business works, and it's what players need. You got to try different stuff to know what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, this has been so incredible. And what is so oh my gosh, I can't even begin. This has been so incredible of an episode, Mark. I can't even begin to thank you, because there's so many things that, well, not only that I learned, but I think that the listeners, will have learned and seen and heard. And we're definitely going to have links to the website and to the museum and all that kind of stuff. The hours for I know you have video walkthroughs of the museum, right, on the internet, obviously, and all that
we've
kind of
had
thing.
some things that we've taken and thrown up on the site. It's hard to really capture the essence of what this place is in a website photo or a website walkthrough, or it's just it's an experience, and people who come here and even if they've seen the website and they're familiar with us for years, they come here and they're just like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, like I said before, it's like a candy store, you know, it
Yeah.
really is like a candy store. And and you know, the thing too, I'm so amazed at how much space you have, you know, like you
The
have a
beauty of St. Louis. Yeah, real estate is reasonable here. In California, I'm sure it would be really hard to be able to have this much kind of real estate, but yeah, we're very lucky here.
yeah, it's, you know, again, perfect location. And listen, thank you so much, Mark. I'm so happy to have had you and all the guys on the podcast. And I think people are going to definitely treasure this episode and want to watch it again and again. And I hope that, you know, we'll get a lot of people visiting you guys and visiting the shop and visiting the museum and stuff.
I hope so. I just keep thinking there's so many things we didn't talk about that we
Maybe we'll have to do a part two. If people want that, then you're gonna, you know,
right.
contact us and we can definitely do a part two for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Mark.
Anytime. It was so much fun, Donna, and we'll take care and keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate everything you're doing. Every one of us has our part, right? And we're doing what we can to keep this whole thing moving forward and keeping people interested in music. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
yep. Take care.